I covered the Jedi Knight or Dark Forces series through the eyes of its protagonist, Kyle Katarn, in a recent video, and of course, before I did that, I did a little primer on the series, as I tend to do. And in that primer, I mentioned that the last game in the series, Jedi Academy, replaced Kyle as the protagonist, as he was already a very powerful individual. So in their eyes, it wouldn't work to have an entire game where the character is already at maximum strength. And if we look at the end result, a game where you add points to your Force abilities in a way very reminiscent to the original Jedi Knight, then sure, Kyle already had all of that. Enter Jaden Korr, your Build-A-Bear character, an exceptional individual just joining Luke's academy on Yavin 4, the Jedi Praxium. He's still a novice, but for reasons that are never explained in the game, he's built his own lightsaber, which is, traditionally, one of the last steps that an apprentice must do before attaining the rank of Jedi Knight. But as it's usually the case, the trip to the academy is not without its bumps, but he and fellow apprentice Rosh survive and are both taken under Kyle's wings. But you already know that. These are the opening sections of Jedi Academy, and I've already partially covered these events in a prior video. So why are we here? Well, after working on the previous video, I had a nagging feeling there was more to be said, especially about Jedi Academy, of how it's both a great game, really fun, and an abysmal, truly awful send-off for the entire series. Kyle Katarn and his supporting cast deserved much better than what they got with Jedi Academy. But let's break that down. Jedi Academy is a fun game. It polishes the gameplay of Jedi Knight 2 and adds some extra layers to the Force play that are reminiscent to Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, with the inclusion of two sides of the Force and different abilities in them, while also having core Force powers that every Force user has access to. And the lightsaber combat is as good as it gets with this iteration of it, which means it swings wildly between delightful and janky as hell. Levels offer a variety of challenges, from straight up kill rooms to lots of platforming and dealing with enemies with both terrain and strategic advantages and deficiencies. If you are clever enough, you can dispatch strong enemies before you even get the chance to light up their own swords or prepare that first Force push. And what's the problem, I hear you ask? The fact that these levels are just filler. The story beats of Jedi Academy are profoundly bare bones, and so all the levels, all the Jedi missions you're sent on, are just there to fill up the time. And the clearest indication of this is that there is no story to be found in any of them. Jaden doesn't learn anything new of himself or the current situation. He doesn't have complex heart-to-heart moments with Kyle, his master, and he's not there to provide any sage advice. And even if you have a companion with you, if it's not one of those story beat required missions, then they're just a warm body. They're supposedly to help you out, but most of the time, not really contributing all that much, as you're fairly overpowered compared to the average enemy. Take Tatooine for example. There's a mission in Mos Eisley. You're there, supposedly, to find information on where the cult of Mark Arachnos is hiding and how they're moving about. But Kyle soon leaves you on your own, and it's Chewbacca who joins you, and he has nothing to offer to the mission, to the story, or anything in between. It's a waste of a cameo. Hell, at the end Kyle returns when everything's been sorted, and you get nothing but some vague assertions that the cult may have Imperial backing, which, if you've played any of the previous games, then you know that was a certainty from the get-go. Worse still, this intel comes from Kyle mentioning it at the end, and it's not something that Jaden discovered. Compare that to Jedi Knight 2. You're looking for Rilo Baruch to get some intel on Desan. Kyle isn't told the whole thing by an ally at the end of a level. Instead, he gets the lead on Nar Shaddaa from Luke, and then we play his hunt for Rilo, going to the bar in Nar Shaddaa, avoiding the snipers and other attackers, getting on the refuse barge, breaking into Rilo's compound, confronting the man, and rescuing Lando, who is the person that provides us with the next piece of the puzzle, but only after we save him. Kyle is the actor in this endeavor. He's the one carrying out the action, learning the information and confronting the bad guy. In Academy, Kyle is not the protagonist. yet he's still the guy finding out the information and doing so off-screen. Jaden's only objective is to kill stuff and press buttons. It would have been much more satisfying if Jaden had to go and get the intel, or hell, that by helping Chewie, protecting him, he can then give us some critical information. But there lies the second rub. None of these missions actually contribute to the next story beat. In each of them, you find some nebulous piece of information, and you assume it's all building up. But how can it, when you don't need to complete all of the missions to proceed? Once you're done with 4 of them, then suddenly the next bit of plot opens up, though you're giving the chance to continue the other missions, which in turn makes it seem like there are no stakes, like the threat is not really that important. You wanna know how you get your next assignment? The one that actually pushes the story forward, but not really? Luke found the information on items that can drain the Force from places from a Jedi holocron, and also someone, behind the scenes, hacked into his files and pulled data on places with strong Force manifestations. So nothing you did up to now in the game has mattered at all. Worse still, and this is something of a trend that will continue for the rest of the game, is that Jedi Academy makes Kyle seem like an awful teacher. Aside from that great intro mission to the Academy, where Kyle says that light and dark side powers are just tools, that what matters is your intent, which is a cutscene I truly adore, as it gives a great insight into Kyle's philosophy of the Force. That's as far as his instructions go. You're an apprentice. Actually, not even that. You are first a student. You become an apprentice later, and then a Jedi Knight, and Kyle has no part in it. The closest you get is a comment after Wash's betrayal, which is also when Luke makes you a Jedi Knight, where Kyle tells the newly minted Jedi that he sensed his anger, and that he must be wary of the dark side, which is such a bland line from a character with such a rich history of brushes with the dark. It's a wasted opportunity to have some genuine bonding between these characters, with Kyle telling him he knows what Jaden is feeling. He set out on a vengeful quest, or driven by rage, at least a couple of times, and he knows how easy it would be to give in and how hard it is to rein in those feelings. Then, when we come to Jaden's crossroad moment, he could recall that conversation, and that could anchor him and turn away from the dark, if one chooses to remain in the light side. Not to mention, these scenes would have done wonders for Jaden's characterization, which is borderline non-existent. Jaden is a textbook game protagonist, saying yes when they ask him to do things, and not really showing any personal desires or ambitions, or even personal issues. In essence, he's the anti-Kyle. That's not to say the rest of the cast favors any better. Tavian had way more personality in Outcast, her apprentice is forgettable, and Rosh's only personality traits are that he's arrogant and whiny. Not a single character in Jedi Academy has much in the way of charisma or depth, but they could have, if some of those filler missions, or even the main ones, had been retooled to tell a better story. Case in point, the first major story mission, which sends Jaden to Hoth, because Luke once had a vision of Obi-Wan Kenobi there, so there should be a Force aura for the cultists to pursue. Hoth is a fun level, and the developers actually tried to reproduce the place as faithful to The Empire Strikes Back as they could, even going through original art and sketches of the place. And story-wise, you fight Tavian's apprentice here, defeat her and she escapes, but not without some intel on Dagobah, which would be their next target. And do you then visit Dagobah to stop them from acquiring the massive dark side presence there? Of course you don't. You go on random missions instead. Now, why do I say Hoth could have been retooled? Well, when we're sent to Hoth, Kyle is sent to the Valley of the Jedi to see if anything has happened there. It would have been much more plot and character significant if Jaden went to the Valley with Kyle. It's one of the most important places in the series, and has a deep connection to Kyle and to the Force, both sides of it. We could have Ron or Morgan Katarn pop up and give the new student a few words of advice or encouragement, maybe even be confronted by the spirit of some dark side Jedis of the past, maybe like Jarek or Bok. This entire game has a Force spirit main villain. Why not show what this kind of being is like before we do the big Marco Ragnos reveal? Even better, it could have been Kyle and both of his students there, to give some glimpses that something is not right with Rosh. And you know, these two are just new students. They shouldn't be sent on their own to planets where there is a definite Imperial force. They should be with their assigned master. In the end, you return from Hoth, go on a new mission, but are now labeled an apprentice. And these are yet more filler with no consequence, and they even waste Boba Fett. He shows up on a contract, you fight him, he goes away, that's it. After the next set of missions, Luke decides to pair people up, so your next mission is with Kyle, and that's what we've been waiting for, a good story beat with Master Kyle. And while he's there primarily to show how powerful you may become, by having every power maxed out, really he's not that much help in the mission. Which is a shame considering Jedi Outcast companions were so damn helpful. Not to mention that the game pulls the "you go this way, I'll take this other route" early on, and you're left without Kyle once more and for the majority of the mission. He does pop up in a couple of places and has some interactions, but hey, the world you're in is home to a Darth Vader fortress. You'd think there would be some commentary on the dark side of the Force and how it's possible to turn back from it when someone seems fully consumed, with Vader as the prime example and Kyle telling of his own experience in Mysteries of the Sith, arming Jaden with knowledge that he could then use to better determine, in the light side path, that Rosh is genuine in his regret and not really fallen to the dark side. But because Jedi Academy has no character moments and the missions are meaningless in the narrative, when it does come to the moment where Jaden has to decide whether to snuff out Rosh or not, there isn't enough of a relationship between these characters or enough depth or personality to any of them to make the scene feel satisfactory. The dialogue comes off flat and forced. These characters didn't develop a friendship, they didn't struggle together. Jaden has no notion that the dark side is something that can be renounced. So he's got few reasons to stop his hand, other than Kyle asking him not to. And even then, there isn't enough of a mentor-to-student relationship established to make it so Kyle's words are something Jaden would take to heart. The pieces are all there, and the opportunities, but Jedi Academy squanders them. Jaden may be the playable character, but he's not really part of the story. Nothing he ever does, save the end mission, if you turn to the dark side, has any impact on the narrative. Luke discovers everything. He's the one that sends you out to the different places and is ultimately the one that kicks off the Korriban invasion and the final levels. You are just a grunt, there to do some missions, not much else. Granted, in universe, Jedi do head out and serve people by going on such endeavors, but you could have disguised the level structure a bit better. You start with a few missions with Kyle as he's showing you the ropes of Jedi work. Then you hit the first major story beat and the focus changes to pursuing the plot. Then you hit a dead end, no intel, and you're told to go on a few missions that have become critical, while your masters and their allies look for new intel. And then you find critical stuff in the missions. You add elements of the next leg of the journey in the missions, making you an active participant in the quest. And it can be this kind of success that makes Rosh jealous and easier to tempt into betraying the Jedi, as competitive as he's shown to be in that early training level. And this works with everything else I've said. You can use the early missions with Kyle to establish the relationship between master and students and between Rosh and Jaden, create a rivalry, maybe even one-sided, have moments where Kyle's experiences can add perspective to the young Jedi apprentices. And so when the betrayal happens, it carries more weight, and so the crossroad moments feels much more compelling. It's why Kyle's sparing or killing Jan in Jedi Knight, or his rash decision to get powered up in the Valley of the Jedi and Outcast, work. Because there's history there. You've seen them together and have great chemistry together and are an established pair. You can care about their well-being. It's hard enough to care about Jaden, being the blank slate of a character as he is, but it's impossible to give a damn about Rosh or anyone else in the story, even Kyle, who you may just like because you played him in previous titles, but there isn't enough of him here in any capacity. Then there are the villains. Mark Arachnos is a big name in Star Wars lore. particularly the old expanded universe, as are many of the Sith Lords. Exar Kun is another example. His spirit had been possessing the Massassi temples that are home to Luke's Jedi Praxium. There are some great novels that tell that story. But in Academy, Ragnos is a name you hear a few times, and then at the end you see him and fight a possessed Tavion in a lackluster final boss fight. But why not bring him back completely? The cultists use their mystic staff to drain everywhere from the Massassi temples to Dagobah. Surely they have enough juice to bring him back. There is a cutscene where someone asks Luke if such a resurrection is even possible. Now imagine how cool the game would be if, as Luke is saying that it's theoretically possible, the scene then cuts to the resurrection actually happening. The problem with the villains is that they don't feel like major threats. They don't have the presence that Jarek or even Desan had. They're mooks, minions. Tavion herself was a mookin outcast, and here she just changed masters, and maybe appears twice in the entire story. She's not around long enough to leave a lasting impression. None of the main story villains do. The Reborn 2.0 do a better job at that. But imagine, first half of the game is pursuing the cult to stop them from getting these Force sites drained. You fail. Marco Ragnos returns and his influence is spreading. So your next set of missions are about stopping his forces. Maybe take out some of the big members of the cult like Tavion, and then at the end, you confront the risen Sith Lord himself, put him back in the dirt. As I said, Jedi Academy had all the pieces, but it doesn't use them properly. And so in the end, while Jedi Academy might be fun to play, at least until doing all the missions stops being fun, as you realize they don't actually matter, narratively, it's a mess. Characterization is subpar, and it does a disservice to all the characters involved, especially those established ones. It makes Luke look like a bad teacher, sending initiates on death missions. Chewie barely matters, Rogue Squadron is there for a random base destruction mission, and the one that comes off the worst is Kyle, who looks incompetent as a teacher, and not someone who, as we all know, has been through experiences that not many Jedi could ever go through. Something the game could have highlighted and used to tell this story and shape these new Jedi characters. You get one level to show the insight he's developed, but that's it. After that, he's the most hands-off of hands-off parents. Just go do it. You'll stumble and slice people in two with a lightsaber, but learn along the way. Just go do it. And with this, I think I am finally done with my view into the Jedi Knight series. I only wish it had better send-off. In my wild dreams, I can imagine a game where you play Max Power Kyle facing off against Marco Ragnos in a more grounded precursor to The Force Unleashed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.